Welcome, everybody. We're really excited to be here following our last webinar to switch gears from talking about cats to talking about dogs. This is the second in a part of a series that we have partnered with Hill's Pet Nutrition to bring you some of these topics that we're going to dive deeper into now and continue to go into as we finish this year and into next year. So with that, I want to kick it over to Courtney.
Thanks, Stephanie, and hello, everyone. I'm sorry, I'm calling from a car in New York, but I can't see the slides, but I assume there's a slide up right now where we just wanted to thank again Shelter Animals Count and all of the team today for letting us be a part of this. Kittens last week were really important, just as large dogs are. So if you haven't had a chance, earlier this year, we released our State of Shelter Pet Adoption report, where we did dig in pretty deep into a lot of the barriers that are keeping people from adopting, but also the opportunities of where we can see, especially from a generational perspective, big opportunities, especially for large dog. And so, you'll just see a little bit of that data here, but and I don't know if we'll go into it super deep today, but Gen Z really is one big opportunity as we think about pathways for these dogs, as is post-adoption support and lots of the other things that the team will cover today. So if you haven't had a chance, feel free to visit hillspet.com/shelter to read the report. And thanks for joining today. So with that, I will kick it over to Tori.
Thank you so much, Courtney, and thank you so much to Hills for leading this very, very important discussion. And I am excited today to be presenting on big dog behavior data that we have at Shelter Animals Count. And before I dive into the data, this is a huge opportunity that we have for more data collection as a whole in our industry. So I'm so excited that we're having this discussion, because I think it's just going to help us go into 2025 recognizing that we have a lot of opportunity here to talk about data and get more data on why big dogs especially are coming into shelters right now. So the data that we have prepared is really around owner surrender subtypes. And so what the data tells us is that when we're collecting our animal level data that we have at Shelter Animals Count, that 87% of owner surrender reasons of why pets are coming in actually don't have a reason listed at all. So this is from a sample size of around 100,000 pets, and 87% of those that were brought in, dogs, do not have a reason listed of why they came into the shelter. So it either is unsure or just no reason listed at all. Of the reasons that we do have of why pets are being surrendered, why dogs are coming into the shelter, owner household factors dominate those reasons at about 10%. And those factors include reasons like appearance, breed type, size, allergies in the home is a big one that's defined by that. Did not list an exact reason. And then behavior of other pets in the home is another big reason that falls into that category. Cost-related issues, can't afford, and life changes are very small reasons of why those pets are coming in. And then behavior-specific reason makes up about 2% of the reasons of why those dogs are coming into the shelter. And it's good to note that some softwares only allow for one reason. So it really depends on the software that you're using of how detailed you can be of why pets are being surrendered to the shelter. When we dive further into those reasons of why we have pets coming into the shelter, this is a sample size of around 11,500 animals. So again, those owner household factors make up 89%. Housing is 3%, no time overwhelmed, 3% can't afford, and behavior are listed at 2%. And then permanent life change is 1%. A lot of that can fall under, maybe having a baby, going through a divorce. We see a lot of those types of reasons can fall under those. And then there are a small amount of pets that were identified that were coming in as death of owner. When we drill even further down into the behavior-related subtypes of why pets are being surrendered to the shelter, this is a very small sample size. So this is around 200 dogs that we're looking at. 56% of those dogs were surrendered because of nuisance behavior, which is defined as a pet exhibiting behavior that the owner family finds to be a nuisance often includes normal, unremarkable behaviors related to the species, such as barking in dogs, scratching furniture, and cats. These reasons are all defined in the Haas intake reasons list that I will post in the comments. And this is opportunities to promote training resources at your organization and in your community. So in those 200 sample size of those dogs, 56% were nuisance behavior, 26% pet person safety, and then 18% were inter-pet conflicts. This is data that we're seeing that we pulled from our Where Have All the Dog Adopters Gone, which is a great webinar that was done earlier this year. There were a couple of them in this, and it shows that length of stay across the board has increased in all size categories. When we compare to where we were pre-pandemic to where we are today, you can see that the length of stay in all size categories with dogs are going up. So small dogs in 2019 were staying in the shelter 9 days. They're now up to 14. Large dogs are seeing the biggest increase. So pre-pandemic, they were staying in shelters a median of 11 days. And then now we're seeing that length of stay increase to 21 days for dogs. This presents a lot of challenges with rehoming larger dogs in the community. They're staying in shelters twice as long. And it increased suggests an urgency for addressing those length of stay and capacity issues in our shelters. And it's an opportunity for improved adoption and pet retention strategies across the board. When we're looking at our data for 2025, as we're heading into the new year, this is where we have a lot of opportunities. So for 2025, as you're getting ready to head into the new year, work on establishing a list of owners under subtypes that will help you explain why pets are coming in. A lot of shelters have a lot of reasons that list why pets are coming in. The Haas intake reasons that I'll post in the comments is a nice list that you can go to start standardizing your data for listing out these intake reasons. And it's important to talk about your data. Be transparent with your community so that they know how they can help you. Share your data and the reasons why pets are coming into your shelter. And then this is a huge opportunity for media, for partnerships with rescues, with spay-neuter clinics in your area, just to get the word out about the reasons that why pets are coming into your shelters and organizations. And then we talk about solutions. So what are some solutions that we can look at? We're going to be talking about some of these today, but there's, low cost veterinary spay-neuter resources, encouraging pet-friendly housing policies, highlighting impact on pet relinquishments in your community. Use your data to talk about that. Partnering with other shelters, local trainers, and housing advocates, safety net foster opportunities to help to foster animals so that they don't have to be relinquished into the shelter. Highlighting successful initiatives to place large breed dogs into home with adoption initiatives as we head into the holidays. It's a great opportunity to promote large dog adoption opportunities, and then sharing rehoming for pet owners and those opportunities that they have. And then just a reminder of the resources that we have here at Shelter Animals Count for you. So there are reports and dashboards that you can use in your portal when you report data to Shelter Animals Count. You can use estimation models that translate trends for figures of how it's going to look in 2025 for your organizations. We also have APIs available. I'll post a link in the comment. If you do not have your data set up to automatically transfer over to Shelter Animals Count, you can set it up with various softwares that are listed here. And then coming soon, actually coming here in a couple weeks, is our Data Basics Workbook. This is very exciting. This is going to be the ultimate guide for data essentials and collection of data in animal welfare. Our thanks to Hills for powering this amazing workbook, and we're really excited to launch that. So I will put a link in the chat of how you can sign up to be the first to be notified when that comes out. We will have another webinar on December 17th that you can register for that will walk you through it. It's going to be a great resource for you and your teams at your organizations as we work to continue standardizing data in animal welfare. And I'm so excited today for this discussion. It's going to be amazing. So I'm excited to welcome Dr. Lisa Gunter and Dr. Erica Feuerbacher from the Virginia Tech School of Animal Sciences. And thank you to Kristen Hassan with Outcomes for Pets, who is moderating this wonderful discussion today. Kick it over to you.
Thank you, Erica and Lisa, for being here. And thanks so much to our sponsor, Hills, for making this possible. I can think of almost no other discussion that's this important. Um, I think, Lisa, do you want to start off by sharing your slides before I launch into my soapbox question moment?
I mean, I don't know though. I mean, I feel like a soapbox moment for you is such a great way to kick things off. I feel
Okay.
like I'm very like grounded in
All
that.
right, let me lay out 3 scenarios to kind of introduce you guys, because I'm here this week. I am with Los Angeles Animal Services and Riverside County Department of Animal Services, 2 of the largest systems in the country. And I work all over the country, and I'm seeing the word behavior is increasingly making me just want to like tear my hair out, because here's my 3 scenarios. One, and these are not the shelters I'm working with this week. These are just very big shelters. So there's a lot of dogs that need help. Number one, a dog comes in and is fearful and kind of low growling. Someone marks it unavailable dash behavior. And a year later, it's sitting there and no one can tell you why. And no one can tell you the last time it's gotten out of a kennel. Scenario number 2, these things actually happened and not long ago. A dog comes in, it's a adopter return for attacking a child. It is slated for euthanasia, and you find out while reading the euthanasia notes that it stole a peanut butter sandwich out of a child's hand. But because the owner said attacking, that is a behavioral issue warranting euthanasia. Scenario 4, a dog with 3 level 4 bites who is considered a behavior dog, has been in a shelter for a year and a half, but really is made available to regular old people, and with some coaching seem to be fine. So these are like 3 scenarios that happen not often, and why the word behavior is just increasingly frustrating me. And so what I'm hoping today is like we can have some real talk about what the heck do we do in this moment when you have a lot of new staff. Turnover's been really high in shelters. You have this like tendency to say, okay, everything's really bad with dogs, so we need to hire a behaviorist, and they need to come in and do behavior things. And we still have dogs sitting there. Our length of stay is going up, euthanasia is going up. Like it seems like it's getting worse. And I know both your work so well, and Lisa, you personally have been a hero to me for so long, because I think that you really think about the experience of the animals, and you really think about the future relationship. And Erica, I know your work because, well, you both are just badasses who write and research a lot on shelter dogs, and in really meaningful ways. So it's super exciting to have you here today, and I'm hoping you can like help us sort all this out and kind of think about the path forward on how we think about behavior in shelter dogs.
Wow. No pressure. Wow. I feel like this is going to be an exciting but daunting like next 30 minutes. I think do you want to talk about those scenarios? Or
I think
where you
maybe if you want to start with, if you want to go into your slides and then we can come back to them, thinking about the fact that what I would say is those scenarios are really frustrating, because most dogs are just dogs and they're losing their shit because they're losing their SHIT because they're just stuck in a kennel. And they're like, I would lose it if I were stuck in a kennel. And so I think your slides would be helpful. And then maybe we can come back to some of those scenarios. It's like, why is this happening?
Yeah. Let me, great call here. I'm going to start off with not actually, the first one. There we go. Okay, I'm going to share this and slideshow from current slide. So one of the things that when we were prepping for this call, we were talking about risk and how do we assess risk. And I think that it's challenging when we think about animal sheltering, because when we talk about the days of yore and behavior assessments and things like that, we were really trying to have this one tool do a lot of things for us. You were supposed to be able to evaluate the safety of the animal. You were supposed to know how it was going to be in the shelter, and then also magically be able to predict how it's going to be in a different environment with people you don't even know, animals you don't even know. I mean, it's sort of absurd. It's absurd to think that we wanted one thing to do so many things. And I think I think because of that, it's not a surprise that when we look at what these types of tools, they do have their limitations. And so how do we then not to say, because we also have a slide that is don't throw the puppy out with the bathwater. So we do think that there is an importance of regularly observing your dogs. We can call it evaluation, we can call it assessment, but at the end of the day, we're just spending time with the animals and getting to know them. Call it whatever you want that makes you comfortable, but we do need to spend time with them if we're to observe their behavior and understand patterns of behavior.
And just, Lisa, just so you know, whatever pop-up is on your screen is also on our screen.
Oh, thanks. You don't want to see that I have my diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging meeting coming up? Great. So I think the first thing we can start with is we need to talk to the owners that are surrendering their pets to us and not cut off that as a sort of lifeline of information for us. The scenario that you gave, I think, is on point with the fact that we have to talk to our owners, just like how we might talk to volunteers, other members of the public, maybe even our staff, about what actually just happened. Not your interpretation, not your label of the behavior, but literally what was just observed. Then we can use that information along with many other observations and understand more about the dog. We are interacting with the dogs all of the time in the shelter. And this is a thing that Eric and I just like, I guess clutch our pearls about and are like, oh my God, why? Is that here we are interacting all the time. And then you go to the animal's record and there's nothing. And to me, I feel like that is such a missed opportunity because we all are then biased towards only recording information that is typically not good about the animal, while we could be missing dozens, hundreds, thousands of interactions where the dog does perfectly well with a person or a dog, and we don't take the time to record it. So I think it's so important that we really do. There is information all around us, and I think sometimes if you're in these situations where you pull up a record and there's nothing about the dog, I can tell you if you go to the kennel staff or volunteers, you will find information, and that means that it is out there. We're just not recording it. At the end of the day, when we look at like I think our history of using evaluations, the one thing that was limiting of them is that they were simply a snapshot in time. And what we need to do is take many snapshots, because that's again how we understand patterns of behavior. So we take a snapshot of the dog's behavior at intake, at medical appointments, anytime we're hanging out with the dog. And I think that helps us make good decisions, because we're not like resting our one decision on like one incident that happened. And I think that that puts a lot of pressure on people, and I think ultimately probably leads to burnout. The last thing that I want to say about this is something that Eric and I say all the time: make it easy to do the right thing. So if we want folks to record behavior in the shelter, make it easy to do. Have drop-down menus. I recently worked with Humane Rescue Alliance in DC, and we created not only a behavior observation behavior observations at intake and during the first 24 hours in the kennel, that had all drop-down menus, but then anytime a volunteer or staff interacts with the animal, they're using a feedback form that uses the exact same questions and drop-down menus. So ultimately, we have all these different ways we've asked the dogs the same questions with different people, and we're learning a lot more about how they are in the shelter and out and about. So I think we can't be upset for people not taking the time to record, when oftentimes we put terminals only in certain places. They're not accessible in the kennels. And so our systems aren't making it easy to get the information we need about these dogs. That's all I got on that.
I'll tack on to what Lisa said. As she mentioned, we want to make it easy, but we also need clear communication. And I think that goes back to some of your scenarios, Kristen, where people use terms differently. And I think those drop-down menus are nice because it constrains choices a little bit. So we're using the same terms, and you can even have it where if you're not sure what it means to use like the word reactive or fearful, you could have a little dictionary that they could click on to be like, oh, these are the behaviors that would go in there, and make sure you're training people on those behaviors prior to, so that we're all speaking the same language. When you were talking about that scenario of the dog attacking the child, I was thinking about my current foster, who's probably going to be permanent. He's been with us for 11 months. And I fostered him. He one of his strong suits is his dog interactions with our very over the top Malinois. And then 3 or 4 months into me fostering him, I mentioned to the shelter, I asked something about him, like, oh no, he's picked up as a stray because he attacked a dog. I was like, he what? Why didn't you tell me that before I started fostering him? And they dug into it, and he had run past a fence and fence fought, like barked at another dog across a fence. But he had been labeled not good with dogs because of that. And then they described to me as a dog attack, which if I were an adopter, I would certainly say that's I'm not I don't want to see him anymore. But it's only because he'd been living in my house for 4 months and doing phenomenally that I was like, what? That can't be right.
That is such a good example. Like that thing of not good with other dogs, that's something that I see a lot in shelters. And I see the staff kind of handling them as if they're dog aggressive, which almost makes, if they are reactive, makes it worse. How do you feel like, you know, some shelters have a lot of resources for a few dogs, some have very few resources for a lot. But how do you suggest they think about this dog assessment piece? Because it's a big one, and we want to sort of identify the dogs that are really truly dog aggressive, but I think we're stigmatizing a ton of dogs because we're scared. Like I'm a pretty fearful handler. And so like if I try to do a dog to dog intro, chances are it's not going to go that well. It doesn't say much about the dog.
Mhm.
How do we get that part right?
Yeah, I think that do you want me to go first, Erica?
Yeah.
I'm gonna wing it with what we've learned, and then hopefully you'll come in with something pithy. Um, I would say that, this is something that I have, this is something we work on with our students, is their handling of the dogs around other dogs. We since last spring, and then Erica's been here much longer than I have, is that we work with undergraduates and graduates, training them on how to handle dogs, how to train dogs, how to introduce dogs to other dogs, and it's complicated. And I've seen in my time in sheltering people's leash handling skills decline incredibly. That folks can't do an on leash introduction, and to me that's a bummer, because I think that with nice long leashes and a lot of movement by the handlers, we can keep the dogs on loose leashes and be able to introduce them in a way that isn't just let them go and see what happens. Those are like, oh man, I hate that phrase. So I think that that's something that we need to be thinking about how do we train up these skills. To your point, we've lost so many folks in the field recently, and so what we see then is as a decrement in skills, so that even this really basic thing folks can't do. And so for our students, this is what it's so funny. This is exactly what we've been working on with our graduate students, is how do we train up these skills? I can tell you, it doesn't come fast. I'll just be totally honest, because this is like not what I would want to hear, nor what we wanted to like say to folks, because this sort of collection of skills of being able to handle the leash and read your dog and read the other dog, and really kind of understand what's going on and give the animals space and allow them to approach situations in their own time, with at the same time recognizing that we're in the shelter, is a skill set that doesn't come quickly. And so what we've been working on is just helping our students learn how to have the dogs around each other, just simply that, because we've even gone away from that we can't even have the dogs near each other. Well, if we think about this like as a shaping procedure, first and foremost is, can we kind of handle the dogs on leash? And for us, we do use harnesses, we do use lots of food, because we want to reinforce good behavior so it shows up more often. And then as the dogs are able to have skills on leash with their folks, because really great stuff happens, then we can bring them in proximity, because now they have a conversation. It's a relationship between the person and the dog working together. And then when they see that other dog, it's like, hey, I can go say hi. It's not like a freight train to this other dog that we can't stop. And then expecting the dogs to do the right thing. And for me, I've always had a problem with the fact that these dogs can't equally be under socialized and having not great like life experience, like not having big, rich lives that they understand how to interact with dogs, and then expect them to just know how to interact with dogs in this really stressful environment when they're put around several at one time with also unknown skills. I think it's a lot to expect that it's going to go all right.
And I don't know, Lisa, if you're going to agree with my statement or not. But I almost feel like if you are going to do a dog-dog test poorly, just don't do it at all. Because I think we end up getting, like you said, Kristen, a lot of misinformation. That dog gets labeled and their path through the shelter changes. And I would rather have no information about that dog's dog skills. And when someone approaches and says, I'm interested in this dog, I have a resident dog, that we then take the time to actually do a really good dog intro with their resident dog rather than testing them really poorly, drawing bad conclusions that then stigmatize that dog and end up, increasing its length of stay. And then maybe it actually does develop dog issues because it's stuck there longer.
Yeah.
So these are great answers. Thank you so much. I agree totally. And the big boss of Shelter Animals Count is here, and my big boss of Shelter Animals Count, and I can see her like staring at me being like, data, Kristen, data. That's why we're here, because really what SAC has tried to do over the last couple of years is to tie regular stuff that's happening to data, because we just haven't done, because we focus so heavily. I mean, SAC is managing this like core piece of intakes and outcomes and length of stay, but also talking about regular things in terms of data. And you all have really looked at sort of data around this. And I want to ask particularly about foster. But before that, I want to understand, in the research you've done, like, how have you looked at shelter dog behavior experience in terms of research and data? Like, I know there's like some cortisone or cortisol or something, but I don't entirely understand it. And if you could just give us like the 101 on that, and then talk a little bit about your foster research.
Oh, sure. Okay. So yes, we measure a hormone that's called cortisol. It is a hormone that's implicated in the stress response system. It just simply measures arousal. So it's not like, oh, high cortisol, bad news. It's just simply telling us that the dog's aroused. And it's with the use of cortisol along with activity data. And more recently, we've been using other physiological measures to really understand what the animals are experiencing. And it's through those measures that we've evaluated things like short-term fostering, or like field trips, so 1 to 4 hours out, sleepovers 1 to 3 nights, and week-long fostering. So, and in the really brief sort of 30-second synopsis of that is that if we have dogs that are struggling, I had a slide, but let's just talk. If we are having dogs in the shelter that are struggling, we need to get them out into a home. We know that fostering, they can come into a house, they can rest and recharge, and that ability to sleep just reduces their cortisol, brings them down. Anybody that's fostered knows that there's that moment they come into the house and they're a bit worked up and they have to check out all the things, and then they kind of move around, and then they decide, hey, I need to take a really big nap because I've been around 50, 100, 150 dogs for the past, I don't know how many days or weeks, and it's been really hard to get a good night's rest. And so that's what they do. And so I think when we see these dogs struggling, I know there can be this sort of inclination to get them out, even if it's just on a field trip. But what our data has shown with our field trips is that they're not stress reducing, and that doesn't mean that they can't be good. I'll come back to that. But I think as a means of stress reduction, look at it from the dog's point of view. They're in this shelter, and even though it's pretty tough, especially from our perspective, we can appreciate it. That then they go out into the world, but that's really unknown for them too. Dogs they don't know, people they don't know, all these sights and sounds. And so while we do think it's a break, we have to also see from the dog's perspective that it's a lot to take in. And so it's not going to give them that sort of rest and recharge that sleepovers and fostering do. With that being said, getting the dogs out of the shelter is saving their lives, because we know that it increases their likelihood of adoption. That if they go out on a field trip, they are 5 times more likely to be adopted than a dog that doesn't. If they go on a sleepover, it's 14 times. So being seen is really important. If we want our dogs to be adopted by our community's got to see them, and they're not always coming to the animal shelter.
Can you say those numbers again? The field trip, the 5 times, what was it?
Yeah, so they're 5 times more likely to be adopted if they go on a field trip compared to dogs that don't. And then they are 14 times more likely to be adopted if they go on a sleepover versus dogs that do not.
And Lisa, you and I work together on the BCA charities. They sort of train people to do foster field trips. And we just got this text from Arizona Humane, who's doing dog field trips. And they said, we had a leadership meeting announced. We have 2,000 volunteers for foster field trips. 40 dogs are going out every weekend. We're about to get 1,000 dogs going out on field trips. So many are finding homes through this program. You have been a real voice for both field trips and for overnights, and can you talk a little bit about why that is?
Sure. Well, it's work that Eric and I have done together. We are partners in crime. For folks that don't know, Eric and I met in animal sheltering over, I guess, over 20 years ago. So these are why I think these questions are so near and dear to our hearts, is because, we've lived through them and want to understand how these interventions work so we can, improve the lives of dogs. With regards to one thing I wanted to share, is it okay if I talk about behavior dogs? Would that be all right? All right. So when we were prepping for this meeting, this webinar, you had asked us, what does it mean to be a behavior dog? And for me, when I think about a behavior dog, and we'll see what Erica has to say, to me, that just means a dog needs support. And it's like mental health support. And so if we kind of think about it in that way, I think there's varying levels that we don't need, as an animal behaviorist. You don't need an animal behaviorist to spend time with animals just because they're a behavior dog. I think in actuality, the more that we can kind of uncouple and take the silo away from behavior and recognize that behavior is everywhere, whether we want it to be or not, and really integrate the ways in which animal care plays a really big role in our behavioral support, I think is a way that we can really empower people that are handling the day-to-day care of our animals to really support their mental health. I think that's the way that Eric and I have worked in sheltering for a long time, that we're not interested in siloing away behavior. With that, one of the things I wanted to chat about is that during the pandemic, we published a paper about our work and our fostering work, which Erica and I were a part of. And so this paper was published at Frontiers, and I just wanted to share it because one of the things that we looked at in this paper was not only dogs and puppies that were fostered and foster experiences, but we particularly looked at dogs that have been identified as having some sort of behavioral need in the shelter. And we kept it very broad. Because I think that a shelter's definition of behavior is probably relevant to their resources and their population. And so what might be a behavior case for one shelter may not be for another. And so we had about a fifth of dogs in our data set of over 2,500 foster experiences that the shelter had said, hey, this dog is a behavior dog. So the thing that we did in this study is we looked at, well, why did foster care end for that dog? So of those 2,500 experiences, we found that many of the reasons why, and this is split, the 25 included puppy and dogs, but if we look specifically at dogs, we see plenty of times the foster care ended just because a dog was being adopted. But what I want to point you to is the percentage about why foster care ended. And it was about 9% that were behavior. So not that big. But when we dug into it deeper, we found that when a dog needed behavioral support in the shelter, 17% of those dogs came back from foster care because of behavior. Whereas if you weren't a dog that had some sort of behavioral support in the shelter, those dogs only came back 5% of the time. So if you were a dog that went out to foster care, you had a much greater likelihood of coming back because of behavioral reasons. And I think that this is really important to note, because I think that this should inform how we think about placement. Because at the end of the day, we think about placing into foster care, and really it's just placement. It is placement into a house, whether it's adoption, whether it's foster. And so when we think about how we need to be supporting folks, we need to make sure that our caregivers and our adopters that are adopting dogs that have had some sort of behavioral need get extra support, because we know that they are more likely to come back into the shelter. And so I think that we don't have the bandwidth to support everyone like we would want, but I think absolutely we need to think about these dogs. the other two things I want to mention is that not only, you know, I am just a big lover of behavioral support for people, because I think it's tough to know what to do. You know, interpretations or labels can be quite deadly for dogs sometimes. And so two things that that I've been working on is, one, I'm working with a company called Gentle Beast, and we're looking at the effects of providing post-adoption support for adopters, behavioral support. So that's something we're doing with Maricopa County, because we're interested particularly in how people use this dog training app, and how it relates to their satisfaction with their pet and their relationship. And I think looking at returns is tough unless we have very large data sets. But I think that we can look at how a dog's behavior can be, and the usage of these apps might influence the closeness that the person has with their dog, which I think goes a long way in those, especially those first couple months of ownership, to the person keeping the pet. So I'll just pause there. You don't have to worry about the other study, but that's just the one thing I'm working on right now.
Erica, you want to add anything?
I think Lisa covered our study really well. She knows the data way better than I do. I think I'm trying to think back to your question. You had a comment in there, and now I'm blanking on what I was going to comment on. I'll let it go for now. If it comes back to me, I'll let you know.
There is a question in the chat I just want to touch on briefly, which is about dog-to-dog introductions, and where can people look to find good guidance on how to do dog-to-dog introductions, either in the shelter, or if you're sending, you know, an adopter home with a dog that they're going to introduce their new dog, and we know we don't want them walking in the front door being like, surprise. Where can people look?
This is so funny you bring this up, because I'll just give a shout out to Ed Wong. He posted on Haas yesterday about, like, should we do dog introductions at the shelter? And it's so like, you did not know that, and then you asked this question, and I think it was such a great conversation, because and it was a really cool conversation. It wasn't like, you shouldn't do this. It was really cool to see what people were doing. And one of the things that I've been struck by for a long time now, is thinking about dog-to-dog introductions, and we talk about it being a requirement. But what if we flipped the script on that and said, hey, why don't we incentivize people, like, bringing their dogs in, so we can help them figure out, like, if this pet is a good match for their dog, or just demonstrate to them how it's done, because most folks have never introduced a dog to another dog, much less like a dog they like just known for an hour. So I think it's so hard for, like, I think we put a lot of responsibility on folks that aren't professionals to get it right. And I don't think that that's 100% fair, but I also think that we can think about, like, the sort of support and, like, customer service, which I saw recently come up. I think Mike Bricker was talking about it, about customer service. And I think that that is a way that we can look at supporting people. I think if we are going to demonstrate how to do it, right, we don't want to do it in the house. We probably don't even want to start in the backyard, and we just want to start in the neighborhood and go for walks together, and kind of get the dogs, you know, like, give them some distance, let them get comfortable with each other. There's a lot to take in. We don't have to, like, turn it into, you know, a mosh pit immediately. We can kind of go for a walk, and then as they, you know, are doing all right, and it's okay to bring food. I feel like there's been a lot of poo-poo about food, but you know, we train so much with food, and I think that we have to help the dogs, like, know what we like, so that if, you know, and then support them in how they display their behavior. We don't want to punish them for doing the wrong thing by growling or barking because they're just saying, hey, I'm not comfortable yet. We don't want to, you know, take the ticker out of the time bomb. And at the same time, we want to let the dogs know when they're getting it right, so that we can help support them as they kind of come in contact with that dog. Obviously, we have to be careful about food when they're interacting, if they both want the same thing. But as we're handling the dogs, I think it can be a real benefit. Erica?
Yeah, I think one of the things that and this really has been designed by Lisa, she worked with one of our online master's students, looking at dog intros, and just a really gradual step-by-step. I think the tendency to rush and be like, let's just get it done. I'm with you, Kristen. Dog intros make me nervous. And so when we actually, I think that's a good sense for yourself. If you feel nervous, then you can imagine, right, how the dog is feeling, because they don't know how this is going to go either. And I think when we take it really slowly, and we all build confidence in, oh, this is how you respond, this is what you seem to like or not like, I can recall you. This is why we use food, is we build a lot of rapport early on of like, hey, come back to me, you'll get good things. That when we get up to these situations where it's like, okay, how's it gonna go? I have some more breaks on the system, right? I can call them out. I also have just more trust in I can understand what that dog is going to do. So I think really like listening to your own self of like, if you're nervous, then your dog probably is, and that you probably need to add some steps in there to make everybody feel better about what's going on, can be really uh, really helpful. And like Lisa said, we don't have to make it a mosh pit right away. I know it can be frustrating to adopters to have to come back a second time, but hopefully if they understand that we really want to make this work, and wouldn't it be, I would think most adopters, I would prefer to have someone help me with the dog introduction than being sent home and hoping it goes okay. So I'd be willing to come back a second time to make sure, yeah, this is a good fit. They've met. We're doing okay on that. And modeling
Well,
that good behavior.
yeah. I mean, I think yeah, as you're talking, so many words are in my head, like zoo, leash, player. So many things are kind of tangled together for me, because I think in one shelter, you've got very tight enclosures, you've got indoor only meeting spaces. It is absolutely a setup for a bad introduction. In the other shelters, you got giant fields where like you could just let the dogs go and they're going to figure it out. I think Janice Bradley just keeps coming to my brain as we're all talking, who's like, look, they're dogs, they've learned to live with each other and people for a long time. We are overdoing it, we're over behavioring them. And I want to know from you two, who I really do respect, I think, your line on this. What do shelters need to know and need to be tracking? Like, what is the baseline of here's what we need to know, and get rid of all the 10 pages of behavioral observation notes that just end up stigmatizing the dog in most cases? What do they need to be tracking? And I'm interested in you talking about the check boxes, because I agree with that, or the, click this. Is that something that shelters can use now? Is that part of one of the shelter software systems? And yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I think to your point, this is something we've been thinking about actually since we've been running our class, because imagine working with like 48 undergraduates and you have to, train them on how to like, intro dogs. So we've kind of thought about this a bit, especially when they're like, kind of all rambling around it at virtually the same time. God help us. And so one of the things that I think I've taken away from that experience, and as we continue to train our graduate students, is we've got to stop squirreling the dogs away in kennels and never having them be near dogs, except for when they're in the kennel and like being yelled at, or being yelled at as other dogs are walking by. I think that, to me, I think some previous research that has demonstrated that, like, we evaluate the dogs at intake and then we evaluate them just a few days later, and the decrements we see are in their dog skills. And I have to wonder how much.
Really?
What
So
was
their
that?
dog skills go down the longer they're, that's fascinating.
And it's just, and it might just be, hey, I'm really shut down when I first come into the shelter. And then as I get a bit more comfortable, I might feel more comfortable to say something. Alternatively, it could be, hey, I've never been in a situation like this. There's all this barking and yelling. And when dogs walk by the kennel, I mean, they're not like, sometimes they're like, hey, we get some of those dogs. My dog Andy is like a hey, but most dogs are walking by the kennel and they're yelling at the other dogs. And so you can't possibly, like, I think it's just too stressful situation for the dog to take away. No, they're cool. They're not, they're not going to be, I don't think that is a likely point for the dog. So I think that we have to do a lot more work of just handling the dogs around other dogs, so that by the time we get to something like them meeting and playing, it has become a common practice that they are near other dogs, which means then that we have to really step up our handling, our handling skills. So that's something that I think is really important. So then we can say, hey, you know what? I was on a walk today and we were like a couple feet away from another dog. He was able to look at the dog and look back. There's a game that we play with our students and the dogs, which our fearless coordinator Megan Aaron turned us on to, which is Super Bowls, where the dogs just learn to they look at us, they go to another bowl, they look back up, they go again, and so they learn just this really nice pattern. all around another dog. So I think that there's a lot of ways we can take the emphasis off the other dog and the folks can just be working. And I would love to see more of that, because I think we go from the dogs having no contact to you have to be on and know all of your skills and be like the perfect party attendant. And I think it is really unfair to them.
Yeah. Erica, you were the one I think that mentioned this like idea of sort of having have choices versus like the crazy notes that get written into. There was this one note, it was a couple of weeks ago, and it was said this dog is pure evil. I have no idea. It was a really nice dog, but like there really aren't standards for documenting. I wish there were. It's part of what we're trying to do at SAC is define terminology as the kind of first step to creating standards in how you document behavior. But what is the ideal world here? Because I think there are going to be shelters listening to this and rescues that listen to this that say like, we want to do this. So we love your webinar, but like, how do we actually conceive of that? How do we get started?
Yeah, I think we and it sounds like maybe with your guide that's coming out, that might help, right? Of giving them some terms. I think one of the big things is training everybody up, that we all kind of agree on what those terms are. So if I write down reactive, we all know what that means, instead of one person saying, oh, reactive to them meant he was cowering in the back of the kennel, and it's very different. So to me, that's I think our big sticking point is just getting everybody trained up on the terms. And like Lisa said, we don't, and you mentioned earlier on that, we're going to hire the behavior department or behavior person. They're going to solve all our problems. And that's just not possible. We have so many other people that are interacting with our animal care staff every day with the dogs, that they need to be doing the behavior work, at least some of the basics, right? Of how do I make friends with this dog? How do I maintain good behavior in this dog? How do I handle them to minimize stress or minimize them yelling at other dogs? So I think really making sure that that is not kept just in the behavior department, but that training goes to everyone and everybody's empowered to make those behavioral assessments or notes. But I think that's where we start is coming up with terms, defining them, and then making and training people to make sure that they're all using them the same way.
We have a couple other things. Don't know if we have time. Erica has some very cool research that was just published about co-housing, and I know you're a
Oh
big
yeah, I'm obsessed. Tell me. I hope
Oh
it's
God.
good, because when I'm in shelters at co-house, generally like my gut is that when it's done with the dogs having choice, meaning like the dogs are actually living with dogs they like, it's very cute and adorable, and they're like huddled up in their kennel, and it's very sweet. And then when it's done by like force and they're like thrown in kennels with each other, that's not so nice. But I'm so curious what you learned.
Yeah, I would completely agree with what you just said. So thank you, Lisa, for putting this in. So we did this at Humane Society of Western Montana, and one of the things we did, we looked at pair housing versus single housing, and we took a variety of measures. We looked at urinary cortisol in terms of again a stress measure, behavior in the kennel, and then their length of stay. And we used dogs that were over 6 months old. Most, because of the shelter we worked at, most were recent transfers. One of the things we did was we did do a quick dog assessment. So we used the matchup 2 dog sub test. We didn't do the whole test, just that dog test, to make sure that they looked, dog friendly, like that you might enjoy hanging out with another dog. All the dogs went through that. So we knew that all the dogs, both in the single and the pair housed, met those same criteria. So it's not that all the dog friendly dogs were in our pair house and not all the dog selective or dog less than friendly dogs were in our single housed. So they were all equally distributed across that. And we did try, it was a small shelter. They know their dogs well. We tried to do some good matching. What we found, especially on the behavior, we saw a reduction in stress related behaviors like ears back, lip licking in our pair house dogs. So we saw fewer stress signals from them. We also saw a reduction in length of stay for pair house dogs. And that goes across the board, that on average, co-house dogs had a 4-day shorter length of stay. And I suspect, again, so many people either have a resident dog or have grand ideas of what like their dog to do, right? To go to the farmer's market or to friends' houses that have dogs. So clearly demonstrating that this dog can be around other dogs, I think is just a big selling point for them. just for this webinar, I divided that data and graphed it against weight. So this is their weight in pounds. The pair house dogs are in white and the single house dogs are in black. And one of the things that I think is interesting is that this is the line for the single housed, I'm trying to remember what I've done here. Yeah, the single housed dogs, that is, as weight goes up, length of stay goes up. We saw that across the board. Bigger dogs have a longer length of stay, which is exactly why we have this webinar, because they stick around with us longer. One of the things that I think is interesting, though, this is the line for our pair housed dogs, and it's flattened. So that effect of longer length of stay with bigger body weights is sort of dampened down when they're pair housed. We don't see quite as much of a increase in length of stay with increased weight as we do if they're single housed. So it seems that our pair housed, not only does it affect all dogs well, our small dogs get adopted faster, but it is having a specific effect on our big dogs too. We can reduce their length of stay by pair housing. And you're absolutely right. I have lots of cute photos. Yeah, and we have lots of cute photos of the dogs had 2 beds in there, but oftentimes they were on one bed snuggling together. And it was just, I think we quantified time in proximity and time in contact. And there was a lot of physical contact that wasn't play or aggression, that they were just hanging out, touching each other. And so I think that this is one of those great solutions. But like you said, it has to be done well. The dogs have to enjoy being around each other. And it was a shelter where we could monitor, the staff could monitor the dogs fairly frequently, make sure everything was going well. And I think if you're not able to do that, then we have to think about other ways of demonstrating their dog skills and highlighting that.
And like not being done well doesn't mean you have to be an expert, you guys. It just means the dogs have to have some choice in it. And like a lot of shelters, when they're full, they're just throwing dogs in kennels together, and seeing them like in an open space where you can see how they interact with each other by choice is really important. And then watching them, I think, going in, but the fear around this, it just shocks me still. Or people being telling us their kennels are too small, which everyone will tell you that, whether their kennel is like a giant kennel or like a tiny kennel. And this really matters. I think this really matters because it goes to your point, which I think should be a theme of today, which is that when we take dogs, put them in shelters and isolate them from everything a normal dog gets in life, it is a recipe for mental crisis in the dogs, which can lead to their euthanasia for no reason, right?
So can I wrap up very quickly with a good upswing for an intervention that we can think about to keep dogs out of shelters? Am I allowed? I'll do it quickly. Awesome. Woohoo! All right. Let's see if I can do the slides. All right. Whoops. All right, here we go. So I just want to wrap up with some of the work that we have done on safety net fostering. This is work that Eric and I have done together along with a really big team at Arizona State and Virginia Tech. And I just think safety net fostering, when we think about big dogs in shelters, the way that we can help big dogs is never to bring them in and never to separate them from their owner, so that we know that it's hard to place them. Why the heck would we separate them and then have to find another person to take care of them? And so so within the study, we worked with 18 animal shelters over the course of about a year and a half. And we were able to look at the outcomes of over almost 500 pets that participated in our program. One of the things that we found is that we can keep these lengths of stay in these programs when they're in the foster home pretty short. We did have a cap of 120 days, but you can see that the median and average time that pets are spending in safety net fostering programs is less than 2 months. So I think if we have good measures in place to stay in contact with folks and really provide them the support that they need by getting them connected with supportive social services, we can keep these lengths of stay low. But the big takeaway here, and this is a photo from Casey Pet Project, thanks so much, Tori, is that of the almost 500 pets that participated in this program, almost 77% were reunited with their owners. So when you think about these programs and you're wondering like, wow, are we just going to, honestly, are we just going to get stuck with these dogs? The answer is no, that they are going to go back to their owners, because think about these folks that are reaching out. They want to keep their pets. And if we can help keep them together, we don't have to find another home for them. We just have to find a foster home for 2 months. We found that almost 17% were rehomed. So the shelter did take them in, but we're able to place them. And then others were transferred to rescue. A few were waiting adoption, and we had less than 2% that ended up being euthanized, dying, or lost in care. The last thing I want to say is that, you know, we had shelters in this program that had over 80% reunification rates. So these programs can really work. I think Chris Fitzgerald was on this call, and while he was at Rochester, and they were part of this project. And I'm a really firm believer in these, and I think it's the way forward so that dogs never have to step foot in the shelter.
Oh, God, I'm so inspired. You
Good.
guys, this is so amazing. And like, it's like so much common sense. And it's like, okay, next time you want to hire more behaviorists, do this instead. Like, keep them with their families, get them in safety net foster, do dog day out. Like, there are so many answers here. And I hope this is just the beginning of a conversation with you both. I think you both have really earned your stripes in this field. You've been doing research for a long time, and you've been in the shelters working on the ground. So you guys know what the problems are. And we just appreciate you so much, and appreciate Hills for bringing you on to talk with us today. So thank you both so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having us. I appreciate you taking the time and hanging out with us.
Yeah, thank you. It's always fun chatting about this.
Thank you so much to everyone who attended today's webinar. I did just put in the chat that the Data Basics Workbook will be launched on the 16th of December. So you can go to our website, shelteranimals.org, to get signed up to get that. And then thank you so much to Hills for powering this Data Foundation series. We are so thankful for your support of these very important discussions. And thank you so much to Lisa, Erica, and Kristen. Sorry, thank you so much for leading this discussion. And every time that you put out studies, anytime that you put out new information, it's just like I go do it directly to like start reading it. I share it with the, you know, all the people that I know in this industry. So thank you for this incredibly important work and leading this discussion. And I feel like we're just at the beginning of this big discussion. So more to come. So thank you very, very much.
Take care.
Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.